Hello, everybody. Greetings and salutations. I'm Roe Shamir, recording and mix engineer located in Tribeca, New York City. I'm a proud member of the Audio Engineering Society and also of the AES New York Section. We have another great event lined up for you today. I want to just take a moment and mention that our AES New York Section co-chair, Paul Womack, is with his family in Texas right now and unfortunately could not make it online today. We were intending for him to be the moderator. We all hope that he and everyone else affected by the power outages and all of the bad weather in our country will get through this all right and that the situation improves soon. A lot of work goes into these online panels behind the scenes. So I want to also send a shout out to the other officers and committee members, Angela Paiva, Jean Montalvo, Jim Julian, and David Bialik. And if you aren't a current member, please consider joining and supporting the society. It's definitely a good idea. Sadly, on a final cadence, our condolences to his wife and his family. A special mention today to Rupert Neve, who just passed away a few days ago at the age of 94, a powerful leader and force of science and audio, with a brilliant design career that spans over 80 years. I'm just going to paraphrase from his website. He founded several historic companies and created the most revered audio equipment of all time. Through his designs and through the music created with them, his spirit will live on eternally. His spirit will live on eternally. God bless you, Rupert. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. And okay, let's get started. Let me please introduce to you our wonderful guests joining us now. So far, one has arrived, and I'd like to welcome both Ian Kagey and Roy Hendrickson of the Powerstation, Berklee in New York City to our event. Nice to see you guys. And I'll be exiting shortly. I just wanted to read a little intro for anybody who might not know already about you guys and about this wonderful place that we call the Recording Mecca of Manhattan. Ian Kagey is the Director of Operations at the Powerstation, Berklee. He's a Grammy-nominated engineer, musician, and educator who started his career at MSR Studios in New York City. And he worked on countless professional recordings for major motion picture soundtracks to Broadway cast albums. And he has a whole lot of other experience in this industry, too, I can tell you firsthand. Roy Hendrickson is the Chief Audio Engineer at the Powerstation at Berklee and is an engineer and mixer whose focus for the past 30 years has been on the integration of musical creativity within the evolving studio landscape. He has worked with many well-known artists and producers over the years and has been at the Powerstation for over 32 years, where he began his career in New York City. And Roy and I go way back, and I've had some of my best experiences while at the Powerstations. I was with Roy many, many decades ago. That's how old I am. Anyway, Roy, please turn on your camera to join us. Thank you. And so, like I said earlier, at this point, I'm going to step out and leave it to the Ian and Roy show, which we greatly appreciate you guys doing this for us today. It's really wonderful to see you guys in person, virtually. And for you, we really like the room you're in, Ian. Thank you so much for letting us get a bird's eye view on that. And I'll leave you guys on that note. Great seeing you both.
Nice to see you.
Well, thank you.
I'll see you a little later on. I just want to tell the audience, please leave any questions in the comments, and we'll be feeding them to our panelists later on in the event. Thank you very much.
First of all, thanks to Roey and Paul for putting this together. We're super happy to be here, and we love AES and are happy to be doing this. Roy, hello.
How are you?
I'm good, man. So here we are. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what exactly Powerstation Berklee NYC is, and kind of how it formed, and how it sort of became what it was, and what it currently is. And then we're going to play, because of COVID, obviously, we would love to give you guys an actual tour of the facility, but unfortunately, that's not really in the cards at this current moment. And fortunately as well, some of our rooms today are actually booked with sessions, which is an excellent thing, but also means that we don't necessarily have access to those spaces. The good news is we have a really excellent virtual tour video, which we can show you, which it's pretty brief, but it'll go through the whole facility. And more importantly, it'll show you not only the classic rooms of the facility, but any of the new facilities and things that we've added to this wonderful building that we inhabit. So just to give you a brief update of, or a brief sort of history of how this sort of came about. Powerstation, as probably many of you know, is an incredibly famous studio in New York City that was started in 1977. It ran as Powerstation for I think quite a long time, almost or over 20 years, and then essentially what happened is that it became Avatar Studios in the 1990s, and then that ran for almost another 20 years. And then the family that owned Avatar Studios basically were looking to sort of move on in the business, but wanted very much for the facility to stay in the music industry and for it to be a place for music to continue for the future. Roy, I don't know if you know but the place was on the market for almost 2 years or even longer, I think.
It was on the market for quite some time, and they really cared about the place and felt like a steward, and wanted it to continue its life as a recording studio.
And so they really, they waited and sort of held out for the right sort of buyer and client to come in and take over the facility. And so what ended up happening is that a gentleman named Pete Muller, who is on the board of trustees of Berklee College of Music, and basically had done some recording there with a gentleman named Rick DePaffy, who's a famous producer and musician in New York City. And Rick kind of told Pete sort of what was going on with the studio, that it was for sale and that this was this, hallowed ground of recording in New York City. And it kind of inspired Pete to really think about kind of how to preserve this place and how to keep this place alive. And their discussion, Pete being on the board of trustees, Rick being a graduate of Berklee, led to, well, what if this is something that could be essentially preserved, but then sort of given to Berklee to kind of run as, both as a recording studio and as continuing sort of Berklee's educational footprint. And a long story short, that's exactly what happened. So through a very long time and process of putting this together, this new entity was formed, which is basically a private-public partnership. So essentially, it was 3 entities that sort of created this, which was Pete Muller, again, generously sort of was able to procure the building and purchase the building. Berklee College of Music, again, is the sort of entity running the facility and is sort of the parent company of this organization. And then we also had an incredibly generous grant from the city of New York. So one of the partners in this has been both the EDC and MOME, which are 2 organizations that support sort of cultural institutions in New York City. So they, again, it was this sort of really cool partnership between all these factors that, again, everything sort of fell into place at the right time. And in 2017, we took over the facility and we began running it as Powerstation at Berklee NYC. When we first took over, we just ran it as a commercial facility. So we didn't do any renovations. We did a few minor equipment upgrades and various things here and there, but we really just ran it as it was, which was an incredible studio. And that allowed us to prepare and to plan for a major renovation to the building, which began in the winter of 2018. And really began in earnest in January of 2019. And it took over 2 years, but we are now at a place where the building is finally reopened, and we've done some major renovations to the facility. The highlights of those renovations, which you're about to see in this video that we're going to show you, are first and foremost preserving the recording studios that were here. So I know that's a lot of people's concern when they hear about renovating a classic studio like this, is making sure that what are these incredible and hallowed and historic spaces are preserved in perpetuity. And that's a large part of what this renovation process was making sure that every step we took and everything we did to the building allowed the studios to remain as they were, these great acoustic spaces and these great spaces for making music. And I'm happy to say that I believe we were successful in that, in the sense that the rooms are back up and running and are, as good as they've ever been. We have improved infrastructure in those spaces. We have done a lot of behind the scenes work as far as updating electrical and making sure that the building is to code. We've added a lot of video infrastructure, and we've really just tried to make it so that this place can again last into the next 40 years of its operation and be able to service clients in the city. So I think what I'm going to do, just to kind of, again, because we can't give you an in-person tour of this, is to play this video back. This is Roy and I's colleague Stephen Weber, who's the executive director of the facility, is going to do a tour through the whole space. You will see Roy and I in this video have brief cameos, sort of like a sitcom. But it also highlights our wonderful staff, which again is really the heart and soul of this place. We have a lot of great people on staff that have worked very hard to put this together and to really continue this being a great place for making music. So yeah, without further ado, I'm just going to share my screen and play the video. It's a little over 10 minutes. We'll play the video back, and then once that's done, we'll come back and talk to you some more.
Great.
Here we go. 1 second. Make sure I share audio this time. There we go.
Hi, Stephen Weber here. Exactly 2 years ago, we began major renovations on the building that houses the Powerstation Studios and Berklee NYC, the New York campus of Berklee College of Music. 2 years, millions of dollars, one pandemic, and the collective efforts of hundreds of construction workers, engineers, acousticians, architects, contractors, and subcontractors later, we're almost ready to reoccupy the building. We're located here in Hell's Kitchen on West 53rd Street between 9th and 10th Avenue, sharing the neighborhood with dozens of Broadway theaters, hundreds of off-Broadway theaters, Carnegie Hall, Radio City Music Hall, Lincoln Center, Alvin Ailey, The Late Show, The Daily Show, major labels, broadcast networks, just blocks from Times Square. The first thing you'll notice about the renovations is we now have an accessible ground floor entrance, complete with a new elevator and a ground floor lobby. Our idea was to make the new lobby kind of reminiscent of the old lobby at Powerstation, so we designed it all in wood like this. Brand new reception desk, and we've got Harley Seeger here. Hi, Harley.
Hi, good to see you. I'm so excited to be working reception here for Powerstation and as the Student Services and Career Coordinator for Berklee NYC.
Our new elevator is huge. It's big enough for a 9-foot concert grand piano and 5 additional people to ride in at the same time. We're shooting this during COVID times. So if you see me or anybody else without a mask on, keep in mind we are complying with all SAG-AFTRA COVID protocols, and Powerstation is an approved studio for SAG-AFTRA use. On the lower level, we've got a nice big lobby here for the Black Box Theater. We're going to go in there in just a minute, but first, let's head down this corridor here. One of the things I love about the renovations is that we finally now have enough restrooms for this building. This building has been chronically under-restroomed for quite a while, but we've made up for that. And then we head down here, we have some writing rooms, and oh, hey, we have Nikki and Regina here. Let's say hello to them. Hey, guys.
Hey.
Hey, listen, I'm giving a tour. Would you introduce yourselves and tell people what you're doing down here?
Sure. Hi, I'm Regina, and I'm a Client Service Associate.
I'm Nikki, I'm also a CSA, and we help facilitate all of the recording sessions that happen here at Powerstation.
Currently, though, we're in the middle of a co-write in one of the production suites here. What's really cool is that the setups down here are super simple. You just bring in your laptop, your gear, and a pal, plug right in, and you can get to work.
Yeah, there's 3 rooms down here just like this, so plenty of space to get writing.
Here at the end of the hall, we have another rehearsal space, which can obviously be used for band rehearsals, choral rehearsals. It also could be used very well for dance rehearsals, as it has a sprung dance floor. So now we're in the brand new Black Box Theater. This Black Box Theater features an amazing LED wall, which can be configured all together like that or in several different components. It features a fully sprung dance floor. We have a nice green room and dressing rooms. There's a video control room adjacent to here. There's also a pantry for live events. This also features a very impressive lighting grid where Matthew Soares right now is at the console. Matthew, tell us a little bit about the lighting grid.
So down here in the Black Box Theater, we have full lighting capability. We have PARs, LECOs, movers, all the industry standard stuff that you would see to light up whatever productions you have. On top of all that, we have this gorgeous QL5 console to sound design or provide audio for whatever you want to bring in here. We're ready for it down here.
So this is the video control room. All 26 of the 4K Ptz cameras come down to here. From here, we can do broadcast, we can do live streaming. We can also capture individual camera feeds. for post-production later on. Gloria and Simon, do you want to tell us a little bit about the capabilities down here?
Sure. We have a live switcher right here, which has control of all the cameras in our studios. We can also control the camera's pan, tilt, zoom right here in our fingertips. You can bring in a director, producer, and we can do live broadcast like a TV studio.
In addition to video tie-lines, this room also supports Dante connectivity, which allows us to seamlessly capture audio from anywhere in the facility.
Welcome to Studio A. This is a legendary space. It was completed in 1977. Some of the earliest clients was Nile Rodgers and Chic, Bruce Springsteen, Madonna, Cyndi Lauper, David Bowie, Dire Straits, the band that took the name Powerstation, as well as many, many Broadway cast albums. Also in here, you can fill this up with strings, you can put a full orchestra. The acoustics are really the signature of this space, and they're defined by the septagonal dome at the top and then the vaulted ceiling that goes way up. Things just sound amazing in here. You can also turn this from one huge space into three pretty large spaces using these movable walls right here, where you can keep the sight lines, but make this into a huge isolation booth here that's actually big enough for a full band. The flexibility in this space is really incredible. Another new addition to the studio that we're excited about is this Steinway D 9-foot concert grand piano. We made a huge investment in video infrastructure, starting with these PTZ cameras. PTZ stands for Pan, Tilt, and Zoom. These are 4K cameras. Here at Studio A, we actually now have 10 cameras. You can do a 10-camera shoot in Studio A without setting up a single camera. We also have some extra cameras that you can bring to bear, some of these Panasonic 4K cameras that were chosen. Or, if you want to go with more of a cinematic look, we also have the industry standard RED cameras with the Canon cinema lenses, which look amazing. We've also replaced all of the track lighting with DMX controllable Times Square lighting. Also, during the renovations, we were able to give Studio A its own very private and very comfortable lounge, complete with accessible restrooms. Here is the control room for Studio A, and here is Ian Kagey. Hey, Ian.
Hey, Stephen.
Could you tell our friends a little bit about the control room here?
Absolutely. Welcome to the control room for Studio A. Studio A's control room is centered around a Neve 8088 analog console. This console was installed in the facility in 1980, and we spent the last 2 years refurbishing it and bringing it back to its home. Other upgrades to the facility include Dante throughout all of the studios, multi-channel headphone systems, as well as state-of-the-art Pro Tools systems. Our hope is that we can support great analog gear with also amazing digital infrastructure.
So leaving the Studio A lounge, we go right into this elevator lobby, which is pretty nice. The gallery is over there, but first let's go take a look at Studio B land. Studio B now has its own dedicated private lounge for artists working in Studio B, where they can hang out between takes, and we have yet another accessible restroom here. Let's head into Studio B itself. Studio B is just a great room to cut a smaller, tight band, a 4-piece, a 5-piece. There's also a piano alcove over here where you can either open it up or you can close it off with the same type of walls with windows in them that we have in Studio A, which you can also do with these two big ISOs here. What we did add was the PTZ cameras, so you can also do a great video shoot here in Studio B without setting up cameras and being obtrusive. So here's the Studio B control room, which is very similar to the Studio A control room, except that it has Ben Miller in it. Ben, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Stephen. Thanks.
That's great. It also has a 72-channel SSL J9000 series console, which I know has been recapped while we were down. And Ben, could you tell us a little bit about that process?
Totally. Yeah, the building renovation was an excellent opportunity for us all to get in and spend some quality time with our vintage gear to make sure that when we reopen, it's going to be better than ever.
Studio C is our second largest tracking room. It's almost as big as Studio A. But one of the great things about Studio C is the way that the ISOs are laid out. We have 5 isolation booths, all with excellent sight lines back here into the main room. Something else unique to Studio C is that it's the only studio we have that's not entirely finished out in the Sugar Pine, but has what we call the Motown room. This ISO was finished out in the same materials as you would find in Motown studios, where Tony Bon Jovi, who designed the place, got his start as a teenager. And hey, we have Brandon here. Brandon, how's it going?
Hey, Steven, how are you?
Good, good. Hey, say hello to everybody and tell them what you're up to.
Hey guys, my name is Brandon Shavir. I'm a CSA here at Powerstation, just getting these drums set up for our session later.
Studio C's control room is equipped with a Neve VR 72-channel console and is also equipped right now with Neil Shaw. Hey Neil, how's it going?
Hey Steven, how are you?
Good.
My name is Neil Shaw. I'm a studio operations associate here at Powerstation. I work with the engineers and clients in the studio to make sure that their session runs smoothly and they have everything they need.
This is the Studio G Lounge. It's got a nice pantry and it's a nice big space. Walking now into the control room of Studio G, our most popular mix room, and here is the most popular mix guy who designed this room, our chief engineer, Roy Hendrickson. Hey, Roy.
How's it going?
Great, man. Hey, would you tell everybody a bit about your long life here at the studio?
Sure. I started here in 1985. It was a very exciting time for me as a young man to get to experience and witness a lot of magic that's happened in these walls.
Yeah, you've done tons and tons of sessions here.
Around 2004, I was able to convert it into a record mixing room, and I always wanted to give one of these back.
Yeah, the SSL G Series, which is an awesome console. Here's the live space for Studio G, which is the smallest of the live spaces of any of the studios, but it's actually a pretty good size. You can cut a small band in here, some singers, do some overdubs while you're mixing. Hey, here's Aki.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Introduce yourself and tell everybody what you do here.
Okay. Hi, my name is Aki Nishimura. I'm a staff engineer at Powerstation. I've been here like 14 years from 06.
Wow, that's great. Before the renovations, this space actually didn't exist. It was part freight elevator, and part just fallow space that wasn't being used in the building at all. Now it's a nice large room that can be used as a classroom, can be used as a rehearsal space, and we are also able to liberate this wonderful window so that students and artists and musicians, as they're rehearsing here, can take a look at the Midtown views, and also it lets in a lot of great light. Now we're in the virtual reality and augmented reality lab. We have 3 of these Jaunt 1 cameras, and we also have the amazing Glenn Forsyth. Glenn, where are you right now?
I'm in Studio A right now, hanging out with the Berklee Indian Ensemble.
That's fantastic. You want to tell us just what it takes to put one of these together?
Sure. Well, we start with these cameras, which have a whole lot of lenses. There's 24 different cameras within just one of these.
And each has its own SD card, which can hold up to 64 gigabytes, right?
Yeah, it's a lot of data. Wow. So we have to bring all of that over to our workstation, and we stitch them all together to create one large video.
That's great. And then how do you look at this at the end?
Well, there's a bunch of different ways you can enjoy this media. Obviously, we have these wonderful headsets, a bunch of different generations of VR headsets.
Enjoy this.
It's the most immersive way, but you're not limited to this. You can actually watch these videos on your smartphone, even with a pair of headphones, or even on a desktop computer, on YouTube or on Facebook.
And this, of course, is the DJ Lab. We have all sorts of DJ gear here, as well as Ryan Nava, longtime DJ, member of the Scratch Ambassadors, and head of Special Ops. Ryan, tell us what we're looking at here.
Absolutely. Well, we got a number of DJ stations here featuring both analog vinyl turntables and the modern digital versions of them. We've also got some analog synthesizers, modern digital keyboards, kind of blending a mixture of the past, present, and pushing towards the future.
Here on the 3rd floor, we have a nice big new space that's going to have multiple functions. This area is actually going to be a study area and a hang space. Brett, introduce yourself and let everybody know what you do.
Hey everyone, I'm Brett Mayer. I'm part of the technical staff here at Powerstation.
Then over here, this is going to be the largest tech lab that we hear at Berklee NYC. There's a place for teaching. There'll be a place for students to bring their own laptops and work and plug into some additional horsepower and some monitors, as well as check out various MIDI controllers. Here in the gallery space, we'll be installing museum quality exhibits tracing the history of the Powerstation as well as the New York City recording industry. There's a beautiful new space with a new window. I want to thank you for joining us on this tour today, and I look forward to welcoming you in the near future to the Powerstation at Berklee NYC in person.
Awesome. I think we are back. Yeah. So again, thanks for watching that with us. That was kind of again, that was Steven Weber taking you through the new building and the new facility, or I should say the renovation of the new facility. I think what you probably saw in the video and were probably curious about was how do we get all these spaces into this same building with maintaining these studio spaces? And I think that as Roy can probably relate to, that was one of the biggest challenges of doing this project was, the intention was this building now has basically a dual function to it in the sense that we are a very high level commercial recording studio. And then we also are beginning to support in the fall full-time educational programs as well. And so how do you fit that all under one roof? And I think that the answer to that was trying to figure out how can we take as much space in the building as possible and convert that into usable space. And so how can we take space in the building that previously either didn't exist because of architectural reasons, or how do we do that and create these spaces with also not disturbing these amazing studios that exist in the same space as well. And Roy, I know that you and I were very involved in so many discussions and so many problem solving as we sort of put this jigsaw puzzle together. Sure. Roy, can you think of one of the sort of biggest challenges we faced as far as the renovation process went? We'll start with the challenging stuff first, I guess.
Well, in my eyes, it was trying to take a floor that was unused, that wasn't really a floor.
Yeah.
It was basically open space hidden behind studios and in between floors, and convert it into new floor space that could be used without sort of causing any acoustical damage to the studios. So it was a pretty big job dealing with really fancy sort of floating concrete in places that there were basically no place for floors in the past. So this is a big feat.
Yeah. And what Roy's referring to is previously in this building, there was a second floor that was some tenant spaces that was basically half of the floor plan of the building. So it only really was the western side of the building. And then the eastern side of the building was the sort of beautiful dome space of Studio A, but above the control room of A was kind of storage and mechanical space previously. And so what ended up happening is that in order to sort of get that ensemble room you guys saw with sort of the half window in it, as Roy mentioned, we had to basically create these floated floors. We basically tried to leave A untouched, but sort of create a floor that kind of went over that control room without disturbing it. And as you can imagine, in an existing building, there were tons of challenges with that, including getting around a giant steel beam, without disturbing the structure of the building, being able to clear the control room of A. I mean, Roy, I remember one of the biggest challenges was that clearance of trying to figure out how we could put in that floor without actually touching the sort of top of the control room.
That's right. And also dealing with the previous infrastructure from before the building was a studio was quite a challenge as well.
Totally. And I think, we would be, I can't go through this discussion without really giving a shout out and mention to Francis Manzella, who unfortunately passed away recently. But Fran was incredibly instrumental in helping us through this process, and basically was kind of our guide acoustically through this process of figuring out how do we put, an ensemble room or recording space right on top of Studio A without it disturbing it sonically. And additionally, one of the bigger challenges in the project as well was creating the theater space you saw, which is in the basement of the building. The theater space that's in the basement of the building was built into a space that previously was just a storage facility. So essentially there was a wood shop down there, actually. There was the old tape locker, and then there was a large area to sort of store gear and equipment. And so that area was never a concern isolation-wise with Studio A and B, which were directly above it. But if we were going to put a space down there where music was going to be happening, it was immediately a concern of how we were going to isolate that space. And again, we kind of took this sort of, I would say, unrealistic challenge to Fran and to describe, how can we build a space where we have a theater where we could have a band playing and then still be able to do a session safely in A or B up in the upper floors. And Fran was really up for the challenge and kind of for every step of the process kind of figured out a lot of these things to fit this into this building and really helped us through this. And honestly, what's amazing is, with acoustic stuff, you don't really know how it's going to perform until you really get in the field sometimes. And I have to say, being back in the building and operating, we are able to actually do exactly what was described. So we can have a very loud event going on in the Black Box theater space directly below A and B, while sessions are still going on in A and B without that one or the other disturbing each other, which is really all that we could have hoped for.
What was great about Fran, I wanted to mention Fran again, is that he was really serious about preserving the sound of the studios and he really took the isolation and preserving the studio seriously. It's, you know, in these kind of construction projects, it's rare to find an external, you know, so a new person to the party to really embrace that, but he certainly did.
Absolutely.
He basically took care of us. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, he was, you know, again, just a huge loss for our community that passed away, and we were so fortunate to work with him and to be able to use his expertise in fitting this building out for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was, again, I just feel really fortunate that we were able to have him involved in the project. Roy, what would you say are, if we go through the, what's I've never asked you this question, but what's your favorite studio to record in the space?
Oh man, you know, I used to have a favorite, but now it depends on how I'm feeling.
Right.
You know, they all are so good in their own way.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just, you know, you have a good day in one studio and then it's your favorite for a little while and then you move on, you know. So that's my answer is like, the more I got to know the studios over time, the more I realized that, you know, it's really about maybe there are certain aesthetic things about the project that might make me choose one over the other ones, but it's hard to choose otherwise, you know.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I feel a similar way. I think that it sort of shifts depending on what you're tracking in the facility for sure. It's really amazing to me, this space. One of the things that's incredible to me about this space is that they were able to create these sort of 3 tracking rooms in A, B, and C that are all very different from each other in a lot of ways, but all, you know, projects sort of seamlessly can work in those spaces, and it all seems to have a similar sonic characteristic or a similar sonic palette that you're pulling from.
And I'm sure that was pretty intentional with Tony, because one of the things him and Bob Walters would speak about is that stressing how the control rooms were the same size, so people could move comfortably from room to room without worrying about sound or ergonomics changing much. And then as I got to use the rooms, I realized, regardless of their size, they all have a very similar sort of sound character to the live rooms. So I think that's pretty brilliant. It's pretty forward thinking. Not something I would expect from that time period, but it's amazing.
And they certainly took a lot of that to the extreme too. I mean, if I move out of the way in Studio C, there's this door behind me, and this door is sort of built to match the look of Studio A, in the sense that there's a door on both sides of the control room in Studio A. And very famously, this door doesn't actually go anywhere. It's literally a dummy, sort of a mock-up of a door. But the whole idea was they didn't want clients to feel like the space was any different than the studio that they were in downstairs. So it's very, very fascinating.
Yeah. The ergonomics were also really super important.
Yeah.
Tony believed in being able to set up the system really fast, and the rest of the staff that was here back then as well. You know, so one person could operate the studio if need be, and it's not too much trouble.
Totally. And I feel like, you know, in Studio A, we very much have that preserved as it was. And so it's really incredible. You really, you know, the patch bay is directly to the left of the engineer. And that's actually where the tape machine room was originally as well. And so it is this really crazy thing where like everything is just in arm's reach. Really quickly kind of dial in a session and get it going. I mean, that room is still to me feels like one of the most efficiently designed sort of recording spaces I've ever been in, where you know, even if you're thrown a last minute change or a last minute you know, session comes in, you really can get up and running in that room very quickly and efficiently.
It's great. It has a lot of appointments. I like to call them features. You know, that we're lucky to sort of inherit over the years. You know, like when they first built Powerstation, you know, Ed Evans in Clear Mountain and Neil Dorfman, all those guys were here, bringing their expertise and their understanding of professional recording all to the party. It all happened, and we're really lucky that the studio ended up, you know, with so much knowledge that sort of created the way it is. You know?
Yeah, I mean that it absolutely. I think every room here sort of feels like that, where it was sort of put together by people that really were doing sessions at a high level and stuff. And I think one of the nicest things about this project is you know, there's a lot of new stuff that got thrown at the building, a lot of things that came into the building, and a lot of again, program space that was gained back, which is really amazing and excellent. But I think that in addition to that, being able to sort of again keep these rooms much as they were, and to, you know, to be able to preserve these and have these still be around is really, I mean, I'm thankful for that every day, because
Me too.
There's so many spaces and rooms like this that you and I have both worked at that have closed or are not around anymore. And so to have this resource still be available for the music community in New York and still have this place still be functioning as a commercial studio is really I mean it's really again it's really unbelievable. I still sort of pinch myself.
Yeah, I feel really lucky too, and I feel like New York really needs large format recording studios, and just there's still a need, and it's a wonderful thing that this one was able to live on.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And it was, it was the process of putting this together was, I mean, really insane, to be perfectly honest, in the sense of it was a very long construction process. When we took over in 2017, the planning of that started almost immediately. So Roy and I have literally been in construction meetings that are still ongoing for almost over 3 years at this point, or almost 4 years at this point, going back. And, to go through each of these steps, including the sort of decommissioning process of the facility, which was in its own right a very challenging process, putting everything into storage for 2 years, watching the construction of the building happen over the 2 years, and then watching everything sort of come back and these spaces come back alive. It's really been quite a journey for sure. I mean, both emotionally and
exactly,
and just in general. But I just remember, it's one of the things that I think for me was like one of the most terrifying things about this was, decommissioning a facility. Basically when we started the construction process, we had to decommission the facility to protect this equipment because there was no way that the equipment could coexist with the level of construction that was going to happen in the space.
Right.
And so I think for me, one of the scariest things was packing up all of this equipment in the studio and this stuff and making sure that it was safely transported and safely stored. And I mean, it really probably the most terrifying moment for me of that was the Studio A console, just because it's this legendary Neve console that was built for the space and has just had so much like that. That's one of those eerie things where the console you sort of feel the reverence of like what was done on that console. You feel the weight of at least for me, like I sort of feel the history of that desk when you're on it. You know what I mean? And I think that it was really spooky having to move that out of its position, in the studio, put it on a truck and to then take it out of the room. And I just remember, I feel like every night I sort of just like, I would always just sort of think about that for like 2 years straight, seriously. And then I just remember I think in September this past year, we brought the console back in.
Right.
And I just remember this huge weight and relief of just as soon as we sort of put the frame back where it was supposed to go and kind of seeing it back in Studio A. That for me, that was like the moment where I was like, okay, we're going to be okay. Everything is, everything's going to come back together and be.
Me too.
And I think the second process of that has just been as we've reopened, because we basically were under construction for, again, over 2 years. We ended up just doing some test sessions and stuff in this fall, and then we really opened officially in January. And the response has been amazing. I mean, it's been so incredible to have sessions back in the building for multiple reasons. One is because we were closed for so long and just seeing that clients were coming back and working in the spaces. But secondly, because of this pandemic, it's sort of a twofold emotional punch of hearing music back in the spaces, but also realizing you're hearing a band play together for the first time in such a long time. So it's it's definitely been it's been very heartening to sort of see these spaces come alive again.
A lot of good energy from the clients who have been back.
Yeah, no, it's nice. Yeah. Roy, I guess I'm trying to think of some other interesting anecdotes from the construction process or from this whole thing. I mean, I just have to say in general, I think you've been such like a sort of guide for me through this and a guru for me through this whole process. And we to give a little backstory, Roy and I actually met at a completely different studio. So I worked at MSR Studios for a very good friend of Roy's, this gentleman named Brad Lee, who was my mentor and worked for him for many years. And I got to assist Roy a bunch back in those days as well. So that's actually how I met Roy. So this project for me feels very full circle in the way that getting to work with you again and sort of getting to again kind of tap your knowledge.
Me too. Actually, me too. Oh, what a great sort of a bit of history,
Yeah. No, totally.
It's been a lot of years, if you think about it. Since those days.
Exactly. Roy, what is your what would you say is what is like your favorite session you've ever done here? This is a totally off the cuff question, but
Man, it depends on the decade, really. But I mean, there are things that I remember, which every number of years something really impacts you a lot, and so some of those moments were, I would have to say, if I have to, I would do it by artist, because I really such a huge. Obviously, we're all a huge fan of music, and the way people's performance can really move you. I'd have to say, Richie Havens and Paul McCartney would be some of the big things that really left a lasting impression, both on a human being level and performance level. And of course, I was starstruck, of course, because I grew up listening to some of these artists as a really young child, and to really be able to interact with them and see their raw talent right in front of you. And, you realize these people are so good. No wonder they were famous when we were kids,
Right.
So you have, I remember Richie Havens, when he would sing, my hair would stand up on my arms. And that's the sort of moment that I live for, is that sort of, those moments,
Totally.
And that's, one place you can find that is in the studio.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I remember, when we first reopened in 2017, we were extremely lucky. We did some very, very end of a project that Paul Simon was working on.
Sure.
He was going back and he was kind of taking B-sides and basically sort of rearranging them and doing them in a completely new way. And I remember one of them was done with almost like a New Orleans brass band ensemble playing a Paul Simon song, and then he was kind of sang over it. And I remember that was definitely one of the, because that when you're in the sort of hallway outside of Studio A, the door has some isolation, but you can definitely hear the music coming out of the door through it. And I just remember hearing that brass band playing and it being very wow, this is such a cool, what a cool moment, or a cool it's kind of crazy.
That's such a cool thing, and such a memory for me of being a Power Station is you'd hear a little bit of the music coming through the door. And a lot of times you'd run into the people at the community coffee machine and go, man, your project sounds amazing.
Yeah, no, it's, I think that's one of the cooler things about running. I think one of the coolest things, and we used to have this at MSR as well, is one of the cooler things about running a multi-room facility, I think, is just you do have that sort of ecosystem that gets created, and you do have people that are coming in and out of the studio. You do have this thing where a lot of times, every once in a while, there is that perfect moment where clients from one room will end up in another, et cetera, and kind of there is this cool sort of community.
Oh, I have many stories like that. Yeah, people when reception was, and there was the old reception area, and it'll probably happen again with the lounges, and people walk by one another and notice each other, and may not even know each other, and they'll end up on singing on the other person's record or something like that. There was a lot of that stuff going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there? I'm curious if there's any questions or anything from the people that are watching the stream, just so we allow some time for that as well.
Yeah, we should have.
If not, I'm happy to keep talking to Russ.
We should have. Does anybody want to know anything?
Yeah, we're happy to answer.
Hey, gentlemen.
Hi.
He's always over my shoulder.
Oh, I like it. Nice, yeah.
So yes, we've had a few questions, and I've been trying to remind people that we're going to come to an end soon to get them to get their questions in a timely manner. So hopefully we'll get some more responses. One question, I'll start with that one because it's maybe you both can offer perspective. What one mic or mics seem to be the favorite of the vocalists that you've recorded there? Obviously, the engineer producer often hand select the choice, but what seems to be a favorite? That was one of the questions from Mary in the audience.
It depends on the year, I think.
Well, if you could tell us maybe a couple of examples at different times, Roy, please.
I'll tell you that when I first got there in the 80s, you used 87, 67, and 47 were sort of the main go-tos, and then C24 and 251 was occasionally something special, but that's pretty much what we saw most of the time.
Yeah, I would say it's one of the coolest things that people don't realize about sort of studio managing is you get to see everybody's input list, which is like one of the most fascinating things about studio management. You sort of get to see people's input lists come in as you get them to the assistant, and it's really cool because you see that there's so many ways to do stuff, and there's so many amazing ways to do stuff, and you sort of learn a lot from seeing that process as well. I would say, I would echo what Roy says. Even to this day, I mean, the 67s are always out on sessions, and those are always sort of the first call for people's vocal mics here for sure. I think a lot of people book the space because they know we have a lot of really great vintage mics that are in great condition, and they can sort of trust those. So I would say, the 251, the 67s are called out quite a bit. I would say on the more theater stuff or some of the newer stuff, TLM 170 is also a really popular choice for vocals these days. I think a lot of that is just because it can take a pretty significant SPL and sort of survive, someone belting right into it. Definitely, I would say that the first call one I've seen personally would be 67s. I think that gets probably requested the most.
Right. Obviously, the question was oriented towards vocalists. And me personally, I know with my experience with you guys as a co-owner of Area 51, that you guys do a lot of multi-mic recordings, obviously, for the theatrical productions. And so that question would be a lot more detailed and difficult to cover in a short time. But you guys always draw upon a wide variety of great low-noise microphones. I can say that firsthand. Let's see, Angela, who's helping me navigate here. Next question. 1 second, please. Okay, here's a more modern question from our audience. Could you just tell us a little bit, without it getting too deep, because it's a pretty sophisticated environment, how you've applied Dante between all the different control rooms, and how often, for me personally, how often do you do the multi-recording events, and have you seen that be, what have you guys learned from those experiences? Obviously, that's way different than working in a single control room with single isolations. Thank you.
Totally. Yeah, that's a great question, and something that we do a lot of here. I think that, I'll answer the Dante question first because it's probably the easiest thing the easier one to answer. We tried to keep all of the sort of analog front end of the studio that existed, and then we wanted Dante to sort of be an add-on to that, in the sense that you could still use the room as it was analog, and then you could kind of use the Dante as an extension of that to tie rooms together, or to send mixes down to the video control room, or to just make routing easier between the space. And so the way that we did that was we utilized what was at the time when we bought them sort of a new development from Digital Audio Denmark and Avid, which was the Matrix system. So the way we really utilize Dante in the space is that it's part of our Pro Tools systems. So we essentially, in each room, we have 48 inputs that are sort of on HDIOs as normal. So it's sort of a 48 in and out as you're used to on any Pro Tools rig. And then the last sort of 24 channels or 64 channels, if you're using Dante on this, become sort of the Swiss Army knife, so to speak. So our Matrix systems are equipped with both analog in and out. So we get up to 72 analog in and out in each room. And then we also have Dante cards in those. So that allows us to really seamlessly route between Pro Tools systems, between rooms, and really allows us to have a lot more flexibility between the spaces, because the Matrix kind of acts as a digital router sort of on top of your Pro Tools system. So you're able to do a lot of sort of very complex routing while keeping the sort of studio side as it's been for kind of as it's been always, with having a sort of analog front end. The other thing we use Dante for now is headphone systems. So, we made the shift in like 2017, 2018 to using Allen Heath ME1 headphone systems, which are basically very similar to an Avion, but much more programmable and customizable. And so those run with some modification, meaning using a card that you buy in addition to that. Those also run on the Dante network. So those are the two ways we use Dante a lot. And a lot of that is used, again, for tying spaces together. We do a lot of sessions where we tie studios together, meaning what I mean by that is, like, let's say studio A and B. We've done sessions where we've tied A, B, and C together, and many other configurations of that. That started really as a necessity, probably I would say, in a couple studios in New York, started at least a decade ago as kind of a necessity, as there were less and less larger spaces to record in. So sessions that kind of pushed that forward were cast album sessions where they still needed to record the whole group together in the same day. And so there was less and less spaces in New York where you could accommodate that. And so what ended up happening is Avatar basically tied to A and B so that those two would be together and used, you could use both as recording spaces. They did that where I worked as well at MSR. We tied A and B together all the time, and it sort of became not like a constant thing, but became something that you would do on larger sessions to get through. Now I have to say what's really interesting is because of COVID restrictions, you have to space musicians out a lot more. And so what I would say, which is really fascinating, is we have, just in our first month of opening, we have already done probably 6 multi-room sessions together. And the reason for that is safety precautions. So they'll have, vocalists have to be spread way more out. Horn players have to be spread way more out. Anybody that sort of needs to perform without a mask on, we've had to sort of follow these very strict restrictions to keep people safe. And so that's actually pushed us to do a lot more, since reopening, pushed us to do a lot more multi-room sessions.
Very cool. I would imagine what the point that Roy made earlier about the consistency of the rooms, even though they're a little different, that has been very, helpful. All that wood consistency between the live rooms doesn't really make you get too much of a different curve on the capture. So you can simulate an orchestral, strings sitting near each other, which is a huge part of the sound. I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know, just sharing with our audience. But yeah, that's very cool that's been happening. Also, again, I'm very familiar with Dante, having worked with Focusrite's interfaces from the very start. So I already know the answer, but maybe some of our viewers might be interested in the latency that you guys experience, which for me was very minimal. I think I had measured it at something like 18 samples. But how have you guys seen the latency? Has that ever been an issue for you between rooms when you're recording multiple stuff?
No, the cool thing about Dante latency is that it's scalable depending on your network speed. And so one of the major things in the renovation we did was putting gigabit network throughout the facility. And so that has helped us keep the latency as minimal as possible on these devices and going through. And I mean, listen, if there's always, with digital and conversion, there's always going to be some amount of latency back to the player, especially going through a headphone system. But I think that we've been able to keep it as minimal as we can, and it hasn't come up as an issue. It's certainly on some of these larger sessions, it hasn't come up as an issue.
I was recently made aware of a protocol called Aloha by ELK, which is a brand new thing that they avoided Windows and Mac and created their own environment, and apparently it has something like 2 milliseconds of turnaround back and forth in terms of the latency, which is a lot less than the 30 that most of these applications have. Separate than Dante, just throwing that in there for our technical friends. Let's see, let's look at the questions real quick. Michael, who asked us about Dante earlier, wants to know if the stairwell still exists, which I know the answer, but let's hear it from you.
Yes, because of fire code, the stairwell still very much exists. The stairwell's still there. It still sounds great. I would say that it got slightly modified because of the addition of the fifth floor. So it's actually we have every intention. We have not done this yet, but once we get through all our inspections and various things, I think we have every intention of wiring it back up as a chamber. Because of it, again, its historic value of that, and also because it's just really cool to have a live chamber on the facility. But yeah, the stairwell is still very much there. Both as a great echo chamber and as a fire egress.
So despite A, B, and C being almost identical, the stairwell has actually changed. It's gotten longer.
A little bit.
And it has black paint. Now that must change the sound.
It's probably, I would say that it, we're not sure.
It should be a little darker anyway.
Yeah, a little darker. No, we're super curious to see what it sounds like now. But yeah, we have every intention of firing it back up because, I mean, why not? It's such a cool part of the
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful.
It's just such a fun thing to have a live chamber in the facility. I remember we were tracking, for renovations, we were tracking a film score for this movie called Ocean's 8, which is, and the composer, Daniel Pemberton, had heard we'd had a live chamber, and so he was so curious about it. And so we showed him how to patch it in, through the speakers and do that. And he was like, no, I want to go see it. And so we brought him into the which was the back stairwell, and brought him in there. And he was like, no, I want to record in here. And so we literally dragged 100-foot mic cables from Studio A, and all of the bongos on that score and percussion on that score were all done. He didn't want to just reamp it,
right. You wanted natural capture
in the chamber,
in the microphone. Yeah.
If there's a great behind the scenes video of that where they captured on like them doing that, and it's very funny because he was like, no, I don't want to use it as a chamber. I want to literally be in the stairwell. It was very funny.
Very cool. Nice story. Let's see. Do we have more questions in here? Okay, well, we'll give them another minute or two to add any more interesting questions. A lot of times, as I mentioned earlier to you guys before we started, a lot of times our eyeballs come after the event. People can't come at 3 o'clock in the afternoon because, you know, they're locked up at home during COVID and they just can't make it here. No, just kidding. On a personal note, one of my most favorite sessions personally was at the Powerstation in A. It was in the 80s. It was with Quincy Jones producing, and it was an amazing rhythm section that I'll never forget. And I had the pleasure of Roy guiding me, which was awesome because he was already about 2 years into his stint, if I'm not mistaken. And so that's my personal recollection. I don't know, is there anything you want to tell us or show us without ripping the cable out of your computer about Studio C? I don't want to put you on the spot.
With the laptop, I'm happy to go mobile. So yeah, I'm in Studio C right now. So this is the VRP console, and again, this console has been in here since 1990. We just recapped it and brought it back to life, and it sounds great. We've been doing a bunch of sessions in here. I'll give you a little peek of the live room with my laptop. It's pretty good. But yeah,
cool.
I guess you sort of saw this in the video before, but I'll give you as much as I can a little panoramic of the space. We kept almost all the same outboard gear in the facilities, and the look and sort of location of stuff is pretty much identical. Again, so the whole idea being that if you've worked here for years and know the space, that it's going to feel very comfortable coming home.
Very cool. Yes, I love the fact that it feels very much like the same place, except for the reception area, of course. But and that was a vibey spot, the reception area. But
anyway. I do miss that reception area. It had really it's truly like an otherworldly place, that's for sure.
Yeah, as Roy said, with all great studios in New York, you always ran into somebody that you either knew or didn't know, and by the end of the relationship of that day or week, you'd be working with each other in some way or shape or form, doing an overdub, or I know I acquired a lot of my famous mixes from meeting people in elevators at soundtracks. It just it happens. So there's something to be said for not being alone and in the box all the time, and unattended as they
that's true,
and unattended as they say. Okay, so